To help me unpack the news of the day, lots of it around, I'm joined by contributor Daisy Cousins. Daisy, hello to you.
Hello, Michael. How are you this evening?
I'm right. You're looking very festive. It's not going to be that festive across much of Australia. In fact, probably more colour going on there with the flowers than we're going to get as far as fireworks in a lot of areas. Just on the fireworks, in Sydney, the midnight fireworks are going to go ahead. They'll be 7 minutes. They may be sort of doused by the rain. We'll see. But a number of people, I got some sympathy with this, say, well, look, if you're going to have any fireworks, have the 9 o'clock one so at least the kids can see it. I mean, the kids have been through a hell of a year too. Adults, we've seen fireworks dime a dozen. But let the kids have a bit of fun.
I think so. I mean, when you're a little kid, I mean, 9 o'clock feels like midnight to you. I mean, you're very excited. You can stay up past 8. It's after dinner. You see all these wonderful things. And I remember being a kid and watching the 9 o'clock fireworks and thinking it was just the most wonderful grown-up thing in the world and how exciting. And it's a new year. And when I'd have to get my new textbooks and all of that, I think, as you say, it's been a real hell of a year for everyone, but particularly the kids. I mean, how kids have dealt with this, losing a whole year of schooling to COVID, not being able to see their friends, not being able to see their relatives, most of the time not having a particularly festive Christmas. I mean, I tend to agree. At least let the kids see the fireworks. You know, I think that would be the appropriate course of action.
All right, now as 2020 comes to a close, it seems that the borders are going back up all over the place. Just one example, Western Australia even closing the border again to Victoria from midnight on Thursday. I mean, what's your take on these border closures? I understand that you need to clamp down on the virus where it is, but, you know, let's say you live in Mildura. You're about 540 kilometres away from Melbourne. Should you be excluded from Western Australia because there's so many cases in Melbourne?
Well, no, of course not. I mean, the border closures from the get-go have been, in my opinion, rather pointless, with the exception, of course, when Victoria was having that rather large outbreak. I mean, unless something has changed since I last checked, the federal health advice has consistently been that there is no medical basis for the state borders closing, again, with the exception of Victoria back in the middle of the year. So, you know, we can blame the state border closures certainly on politics. I mean, Anastasia Palaszczuk had a little election to win, and she petitioned that she was keeping Queenslanders safe by shutting these borders. Certainly Mark McGowan of Western Australia has played on the sort of natural parochialism of his state and is now enjoying huge popularity because he's posited himself as the saviour of everyone's lives by shutting the borders. But the federal health advice has never been that. And certainly New South Wales has demonstrated that with the government doing the heavy lifting rather than expecting citizens to shut their businesses and stay at home, etc., but with really well-resourced contact tracing, you know, working around the clock to get everyone putting out up-to-date information constantly and jumping on these spot fires where they arise, you can very successfully suppress the virus without even needing a compulsory mask order. And remember, Michael, the goal was only ever suppression. It was never elimination. That sort of crept in when all the state premiers, except for Gladys Berejiklian, tried to kind of one-up each other. So what I've concluded, you know, we can talk about the politics of it, we can talk about the grandstanding. I just think it's pure laziness on behalf of premiers like Mark McGowan and Anastasia Palaszczuk that they've gone with these sort of these great big border closures rather than resourcing their own contact tracing departments. I mean, New South Wales has proved with just a little bit of extra work, a little bit of extra logistics, that people can live their normal lives, more or less. You know, you can keep the borders open. You don't even need a compulsory mask order, and you'll keep the virus controlled. They are the most populous state, and they're taking the bulk of international travel. There is no excuse for other states not to operate like that. So I think, really, it is just laziness on behalf of these premiers.
Well, let's look broadly then, laziness or not, at the Federation. I said at the very top of the show, well, the thing that I think makes Australia exceptional is that it's an entire continent dominated by just one country. It doesn't exist anywhere else like that. I mean, we could have become South America, we could have become Africa, but our forefathers had the wisdom to unite all the separate colonies, all the disparate colonies, into a federated nation. And yet, probably ever since 1901, COVID has been the greatest challenge, I would think, to that sense of federation. And the premiers are reaching into the Constitution, legally it seems, yes, to shut borders down. But this is something that has to be looked at, doesn't it, if not discussed robustly at the National Cabinet, if it's to mean anything next year. this notion of the colony states, as it were, the Australia approaching this as a federated nation?
Well, absolutely. I think the border closures, as you say, laziness or not, they're incredibly sad, because it's like we're sort of slipping back into this sort of, colonial mindset where everyone is sort of vaguely separate. And it is not what our forefathers envisioned for the nation. And regarding the Constitution, I mean, there is a bit of debate about that. I believe it's Section 92 of the Constitution states that we should be able to have, free trade between states and free movement, of course. Well, so, you could argue the state borders are incredibly unconstitutional, and there are a lot of people who have, but Scott Morrison said that moving forward through COVID, we can't keep opening and closing the state borders. It's ridiculous. It puts huge stress on businesses, huge stress on families, and all for a virus. And I don't want to take away from anybody who's passed on or who's suffered terribly from having COVID. When COVID is bad, it is very, very bad, and COVID can certainly kill. But the fatality rate of COVID, according to the CDC in America, is less than 1%. The survival rates are extremely high. It's not the next bubonic plague. So we need to be really careful of this sort of toxic parochialism that's seeping through a lot of the states, because it is simply not what our forefathers envisioned for this country.
I suppose not. All right, let's look at a couple of other things before we together bring the year to an end. Of course, poor old Kerri-Anne Kennerley, she's had a fall during Pippin, done a collarbone, I think, but I mean, here's Pippin, musical finally on, people turning up, people enjoying it, and there goes poor old Cac. Base over Apex, but she'll be back at some point, not for Pippin, but dear oh dear, not the way to end 2020.
I know, what a shame. I mean, isn't that just the grand finale to 2020? I know the show Pippin extremely well. It's an absolutely beautiful show. I saw this particular production that's been imported to Australia on Broadway a couple of years ago. It's absolutely lovely, and it's a really fantastic one for Australian theatre to open on again. So, God, poor Kerri-Anne Kennerley, lo and behold, falls 4 metres down off a trapeze during her big number. And yes, she's broken her collarbone quite badly, and she's also chipped her ankle, but God love her, she's such a trooper. She got back up, dusted herself off, and finished the song,
the show,
and then left the stage before. She's extraordinary. As they say, the show must go on, but it is just such a bummer. I mean, I really do wish her well. I believe she'll be back at some point, but probably not before the end of the season in Sydney, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you're right. Hey, before you go, are you a Gilligan Island fan?
Look, I confess I was not, although I understand it to be a very iconic show, but it is extraordinarily sad and moving to hear of the death of its former star. I mean, as I mentioned, Dawn Wells, thank you. Again, was not a Gideon Island fan, so her name unfortunately escaped me, but I do know her to be a legend, and I do know that show has such a dedicated fan base. So love and thoughts and prayers, as they say, to her family and friends. I am sure that fans of the show will not forget her, and it is a sobering reminder, as I said, although again the fatality rates are low for this virus, people do die, and the sad thing about it is that people will most of the time die alone because of course they want to quarantine everyone. So very, very sad news indeed.
Yeah, only 3 series for Gilligan's Island, but it sort of got cult status afterwards, as is often the case. Before you go, tell me your predictions for 2021. How do you see the year panning out?
Oh, goodness me. Far be it for me to make any predictions for 2021, but look, optimistically, I'll have a stab. Look, optimistically, I would really like to see world leaders kind of calming down on the COVID hysteria a bit with the introduction of various vaccinations. I mean, we know we've got the Pfizer vaccine, we've got the Moderna vaccine. I think today the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine was approved in the UK, so there's at least 3 good ones on the go. I am optimistically predicting that those will be rolled out, and those who want to have a vaccine can have a vaccine. Those who do not wish to have it, I am hoping will not be pressured into having it, and hopefully by the end of 2021 we can get back to some sort of semblance of normal. That would be lovely.